All right, very good evening, everybody, or indeed, if you're watching this back, then a warm welcome to you. If you're watching this meeting back in your own time, of course. But welcome. This is our first event under a new committee of the East Midlands branch of the Energy Institute. So I'm actually going to start off with what we're sort of going to be covering tonight. So these timings are approximately. We may go slightly over. We may be under. It's not an issue. Feel free to use the time at the end with the Q&A as you desire. But essentially, we'll give you a quick introduction to the new committee for the East Midlands. We're joined tonight by Adam Wright, who will be delivering a presentation. I too will be giving an update regarding the minimum energy efficiency standards and EPC reform. Then, as mentioned, towards the end, we'll have a Q&A and then a little bit of a close where we'll discuss how you can get in touch and then what sort of the future for 2025 holds. So without further ado, I'll sort of get introducing. So yeah, the new committee now for the East Midlands constitutes of myself, who's taken over as chairman. So I'm Jordan Turner. My sort of background resided initially in residential property. I had 6 years sort of working in all levels of property, sales, property management, lettings, portfolio management, before then completing my master's in real estate, heading over into the commercial sector and having a sort of brief 2-year spell in commercial property where I trained as a surveyor. And then started my PhD, started lecturing, and then that is kind of really a snapshot of what the last sort of, well, I would say, best part of the year as hell, where I was an associate tutor before then becoming a full-time lecturer now at UCEM, which is where my job is now. I'm a full-time lecturer there, and as I said, as well as doing my PhD, in which a little bit of the area I'll be talking about tonight is kind of covered in that, but a little bit of an update as well. But I'll be quiet for the next few moments. I'll hand you over to my wonderful colleagues as well, who I'm joined with tonight. So Adi Tunjay, Kennedy, and Crispell, and I'll let them do their own intros.
So I guess we are seeing who's going next. Sorry, my camera's not working. I'm Chris Pal Anand. I'm the membership lead within the East Midlands branch, and also my background is I'm the head of carbon and energy at the University of Leicester, and I've been within the industry, energy industry, energy management industry for over about 20 years. I'm also a chartered energy manager, and I'm a fellow at the Energy Institute.
Right, thank you very much. My name is Kennedy Waldo. I'm the treasurer of East Midlands Unit Branch. My background is I'm working as an environmental scientist in the company called First Environmental Integrity. I'm also program plan operating for an NGO called Mazingira, which is international and based in Kenya. I'm also a doctoral researcher at Cambridge University. It's a pleasure and it's nice to meet you all. Thank you very much.
Okay. So thank you. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yep, all
I
good.
don't know if you can. Oh, good.
Yep.
Jordan, you can hear
Can
me.
hear
Yeah,
you.
everyone. Okay, really good. I think there's just trying to sort out the video, which will happen in a couple of minutes. But for now, I'll just go on. Adetunji Lawal, branch secretary on the East Midlands branch. I previously was in the West Midlands branch for some years before moving over to this branch, just in the last year. So really pleased to be secretary for the branch and working with the team. I'm the head of energy and carbon for waste group. We're a tier one construction company in the United Kingdom. We do a lot of new build, retrofit work, and I'm a chartered energy manager, and I've been in the industry for about 20 years, doing a lot around energy reduction, carbon reduction, and from a day-to-day basis, I'm also involved in a lot of major um, new build projects across various aspects of the built environment. So it's really for me, I'm pleased to be a part of the team, and also pleased to have to be sharing with everyone here today about. I believe we're going to share a lot today about carbon and energy, and importantly, how we can help improve sustainability in the built environment, which accounts for circa about 25% of the emissions at the minute. So thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you, everyone, and yeah. So without further ado, I've managed to get this off at LinkedIn, Hannes. I hope you don't mind. It's a better photo than what I've got, so here you are. So I will without further ado, I will let you sort of introduce yourself, Adam, and sort of tell us what your talk will be about tonight.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully you guys can see that, and you'll see that great minds think alike. I've chosen the same photo. Cool. Can you see that that screen all right, everyone?
I can see it, Adam.
Oh, cool. Great.
And I can hear you very well.
Good. Right. So I'm Adam Wright. I am the product director at Measurable Energy, and we are a tech scale-up who use plug sockets, ML, and AI to automatically reduce energy consumption in commercial buildings. And tonight, I'm going to talk to you about baselining and why I believe that it's no longer up to standard for justifying energy savings. So let's get started, okay? And not teaching you all how to suck eggs. We're just going to go through this beginning bit very, very quickly. But we all know this process, okay? So as an energy manager, you survey or audit a building or a group of buildings. We compile findings and then recommend processes or technology for energy reduction. In that process, there's some, projecting of energy savings, and it will identify, some technology that we might want to use. Okay, so familiar things like HVAC, circuit control, lighting, some plant control. There's lots of other things here. So this is not exhaustive by any means, and smart sockets. Okay, so we've gone and installed that energy saving technology. And now we need to provide that first bit of evidence and report that these savings are doing what we've said they're doing and are reducing energy consumption. Okay. And we come back to the fundamental problem with that, which is you can't measure the energy consumption of something that you've turned off. So no matter what solution we use, we're going to have this challenge. We're turning things off to save energy and emissions. We can't take a measurement from that. So we go to the next. We know this challenge, and we go to the next best thing. So we start with monitoring and creating an energy baseline over a set period. Okay, say for example here over a month. Okay. And then we turn those controls on for whatever technology we've chosen, and then we monitor that over say another month, and we have our before and after. Great, but is it great? Because when we look at this in this scenario, there's actually a very, very small difference between October and November. We've got our 2 months. We would have wanted to be able to maybe project some, some further savings or some ROI, but the data is not looking great here. So in this case, we're gonna, we want to dig a bit deeper into this. Now, fast forward a little further down the line, and we've got a lot more data, to look at. We've got that whole year, and we can actually go and compare an October against an October rather than October and November. And now that we've got more data, we've got sort of a bit more insight into what's going on here. You know, we can start to see trends or patterns or things that you know, that might be normal or might not be normal. You can see in this data that there's been a lot more energy use in the winter months. It's dropped off drastically in summer months. And then when it started to come back up, as we've got back into winter months, it's nowhere near as high as that previous October. So great, we've got a nice big energy reduction here. But do we? Because there's an awful lot that's going on here that we can't control. There's all of these variables that are happening in this data. There's different weather, the different seasons, holidays within there, hybrid working patterns. Just days in a month are different when we're comparing months. The appliances might be used in different ways. There might be different numbers of people at different times. The health of the appliances might be deteriorating or getting better if the new things are getting rolled out. There's different things are there or in use. There might be other energy reduction schemes or plans that are in various different stages of rollout. And then, of course, we've got all these different occupant behaviors. And none of these things are accounted for within this kind of comparison here. So can we truly take 23 kilowatts, the previous one, or 900 and go, this is exactly what the energy reduction is? And what I'm leading to is that I believe there is a much better way to do this. Okay. And I know that AI is everywhere right now. And I promise you that this is the only AI generated energy manager lording over energy savings in this talk. But we do often get distracted by what AI's original purpose was and still is. And that is that the AI enables technical systems to perceive their environment, deal with what they perceive, solve problems, and act to achieve a specific goal. And in the case of energy management, we have some very specific goals. You know, we are trying to reduce energy, and in this case, we have an even more specific goal that we can use this for. So we want to accurately project real energy savings by removing the known variables that influence traditional baselining. Using AI, we are able to actually remove some of those variables. We've got some technology lends itself to removing some of them itself, and some processes remove it. But AI is something that can really take away a lot of those unknowns, and then allow us to really focus in on that data. And I'm going to show you how. So I'm going to use plug sockets as an example, but realistically, all of these kind of themes through here can apply to other pieces of technology. So we're going to start at the appliance point, and that is what appliance is plugged in. If we know what that appliance is, we can start making more informed decisions and predictions, based on the fact that we know what that appliance is. So we use a machine learning model that contains the energy profiles of thousands of different appliances that's capable of identifying appliances in an accuracy tier. And what that means is it starts to gather data, and it can identify that that's a piece of office equipment. And if we know that that's a piece of office equipment, that's more valuable than knowing that it could be a piece of kitchen equipment, or it could be, any other equipment that isn't used in an office setting. And then when it gets more data, it could go, it's a computer. And now we know within office equipment that that's a computer. And we've got even more context to know whether or not, what it is, and then learn more about that energy pattern. And then the final tier being really, really specific. So that's a dock, that's a laptop, that's a desktop. And if we bring back up our variables, if we know first what that appliance is that's there, we can start removing some of these variables. We don't need necessarily to know that. We already know the appliance type, and we've also got information about that appliance health, because we've got this sort of model of different appliances at different levels of health. So that's the first step. Second step, energy state. So if we know that it is a monitor and we know what state it's in, so is that appliance in active energy use? Is it in standby? Is it off? We use an AI algorithm that identifies when an appliance is in active energy use, standby, or off. And what we know is that and it's relatively common knowledge, is many appliances have multiple different active and standby energy modes within their power consumption. But why is this important? Well, if we know that it's a monitor and it's in standby, we're further down the line for having for more context to be able to say, can this thing be turned off? And if it's turned off, what was that energy saving? Now, what you're seeing in that little graph there is the energy states of a laptop charging. So the orange, red, and green are all active energy states, and you can see that there's a wide variety of different power, energy that's being drawn from that laptop while it's actively in use. And then the kind of the blue down below is the standby, and even within standby there are different levels of energy in there. Now, understanding that and knowing that then allows us to go to the next step and more accurately project what that appliance would have been doing when it was turned off. It also removes another variable from the mix. So appliance use comes out of it. Now, the third piece of the puzzle here is we know the appliance, we know the energy state that it's in, and then we know what energy behavior we're seeing from that. And this is not the same as the state here. This is the pattern of what happens to that appliance when it goes between active and standby. So, for example, a monitor goes into standby after it's not been actively used for, say, 30 minutes. Yeah, a hot water tap keeps boiling hot water every hour, even if there's no one in that building. And this kind of combines a bit of ML and AI to give this almost occupancy-based pattern recognition. So it involves some of the use of the people in the building, but it basically then connects the puzzle together. You know that it's a monitor, you know that it's in standby state when it gets turned off, and you know the historic pattern of what that does. You've now got all the pieces to way more accurately say that this appliance was going to use this amount of energy in the time that it was off. And the key bit here is when all three are combined together, all of these variables that you see in front of you disappear away. It no longer matters about occupant behavior. It doesn't matter about the level of tech rollout in the building. The number of people that are in there, the days in the month, the hybrid working patterns, when are holidays, seasons, weather, all of these disappear off. And I want to give you an example of how this works in reality. So how does this all fit together? Okay, so we've got a desk there, and we know that the appliance is a monitor, and say it's a laptop computer, and it's currently in use. Okay, and that occupant takes their laptop away, and that monitor goes into standby. Great. Okay, we should turn this off. But before we do that, we could check all of the desks in that area, and we see that actually there's no one in that area of that office working. Everything's gone into standby. Okay, great. So we can turn off all of these desks that are wasting energy. But there's no one in this building, and in the kitchen, the hot water tap is still on and it's boiling hot water. We know that in this area there's no one there. So why is that hot water tap boiling away through the night? It can be turned off and come back on with enough time to to reboil before people come in the next day. So let's turn that off. And then we see that the meeting rooms all have the TVs still on. So there's no one there. There's no need to have those still on. So we can turn those off as well. And that's how that full picture, comes together. The identification of the appliances then drives this system to be able to, first know what can be turned off, and then when we do turn things off, know how accurately we can project what energy would have been there. So let's just circle back around quickly. We've come back to baselining. Okay, so from that, we're looking back at that October. We know that that the energy saved was somewhere between 23 and 900 kilowatt hours. Okay, and we can use the grid's average carbon intensity there to sort of to work out what the carbon reduction is and have a range of reductions there. But if we look at what the measurable energy AI did on that exact same data set, we see a bit of a different picture here. So over that month, turning stuff on and off and looking at things on an individual appliance level and then amalgamating those savings up together, it projected that we saved 481 kilowatt hours and 57 kilograms of CO2 emissions. And those emissions were based off the actual carbon intensity of the grid at the time when that energy would have been used there. And all of this is verifiable against meter data and energy bills. So what does this mean for the client? Okay, and that's what we're kind of we circle back to. It all comes down to what does it get to to the client that we're trying to serve here. And that is that with baselining we have these uncontrolled variables in the data. We can reduce some of them by process, or some technologies naturally lend themselves to be able to reduce it because they might only be focused around one appliance, like say HVAC or lighting. Yeah. But then we get this scenario where, because of these uncontrolled variables, we get reported energy savings that aren't matchable to bills, whether or not that's meter data or actual energy bills. And what that ends up driving is this lack of confidence in tech, where the technology is doing what it's supposed to be doing, but our reporting is not is not doing it justice. And then it makes it very, very unlikely to scale because it's not accurately represented, and it's eroded maybe some of that trust there. But when we're able to use some of these, these AI technologies that are available now, we can remove, if not all of them, most of these variables. And then what the output from them becomes much more reconcilable with energy bills. And that drives confidence, and then that drives these technology to be set up to scale and grow. So why do we need to ask for more from our tech? And this comes down to some key fundamentals within energy management. So trust has always been a fundamental part of energy management. Before energy bills got higher, and now as we've got more technology coming through, it is all about saying, delivering projections of what we think we're going to say, what we think we're going to save, and then backing that up with the actual savings. So we need stuff that will sort of drive this trust in that technology, and we need to be avoiding errors and inaccuracies in data because that erodes trust. We need that reliable robust service, and there's that kind of want to go above and beyond what the normal status quo is, and ultimately that allows us to be exemplary in the service that's offered. So just to finish off, I just want to say that the technology is here right now to do this kind of thing. AI can be used in this way. We're doing it right now with this kind of AI, and we're doing it across a wide range of different building types, with customers who are rolling out across whole estates, and they're doing this because among other reasons, the control is automatic and the savings are verified. It's not actionable insight. It's quite simply turning off all the appliances that are wasting energy when people are not in the building, and reporting as accurately as possible what those savings in energy emissions are. And I think we're going to come back to questions at the end. So I'll leave it there.
No, thank you very much, Adam. Really, really appreciate that. And yeah, absolutely. We'll come to some questions at the end. I'm sure there will be some following from that. But no, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And thanks for joining us tonight and giving your time as well. It's very much appreciated. So thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Right, and with that, we'll we'll move on to the second part with myself. So that was indeed me before I started a PhD, and my child came along. So looking looking a little bit better a couple of years ago there. But no, so as mentioned at the start, my sort of aim tonight really is to sort of give an update to those not aware, but to so really kind of bring the awareness of the topic and sort of talk about, well, what is this going to mean from sort of a practical point of view, and what are the challenges, and more importantly, how do we overcome these challenges when it comes to looking around the area of minimum energy efficiency standards and, of course, energy performance certificates. Now, we should all be familiar with these sort of regulations now, or MEES, or minimum energy efficiency standards, which I'll not keep repeating through the night. We'll just sort of say MEES and EPCs, but ultimately introduced in 2018 across the residential sector. And what this meant is that all EPC ratings, with the exception, of course, of some exemptions, which we'll touch on a little bit later, essentially the properties which were being rented out needed to achieve a minimum EPC rating of an E. This then extended into the commercial sector. So from the 1st of April of 2023, this then extended into commercial properties as well. And again, unless there was sort of certain exemptions which were there, then this extended right across, so that essentially all properties being rented needed to achieve a minimum rating of an E. But there's upcoming changes. Now, there's been a lot of talk of cancelling it altogether. It's been postponed. It's been brought back to the table. It's been scrapped again. It's been brought back to the table and postponed again. But I think now we're at a stage where it seems apparent, or certainly seems to be the case now, that these changes are indeed coming in. And even if they are postponed again, I think it would definitely be safe to say that these changes are happening, and it is probably more a case now of when rather than if they're going to happen. And quite simply now, the minimum EPC rating, which as mentioned is currently at an E, is going to increase to a C and potentially a B rating. So the current track or proposal 2027-2028 to increase to a C, and then by 2030, the proposal to move to a minimum EPC rating of a B. So there we are, as mentioned. So yeah, 2027 for the C, and then B rating by 2030. But the key thing I've highlighted here is that fines may be introduced for non-compliance. And this is something that we are going to sort of touch on throughout this. Now, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of breaches which have already occurred. So since the introduction of MEES in 2018, and then of course into the commercial sector for 2023, there's been thousands of breaches. Yet there's only actually been an handful of these which have converted into fines. So essentially, we're seeing thousands and thousands of actual breaches of the EPC regulations, or MEES regulations, where they're not meeting the required standard of an E. However, they're not actually doing anything about it, in the sense that, well, they're not actually fining these people who are non-compliant. And the quote from one of the studies is, well, there's significant challenges without enforcement. Sorry, get that right. Serious challenges or significant challenges with enforcement. In other words, saying that it's extremely challenging to police, and then even more so to actually then get it to a stage where you can start to impose fines on non-compliance. And interestingly, a study which was carried out from 2020 to 2023. Now, of course, 2020 was difficult, as was 21. We all know the dreaded word of COVID, and what happened there and how challenging that was, and the difficulties faced around that. However, in the study which followed this period, 2020 to 2023, there was data which was collected from 23 local authorities, or 23 councils. And what was quite alarming here is they actually indicated there was 400 breaches, but only 26 fines were issued. So 400 breaches found in this study, knowingly 400 breaches, where they were not up to the standard of an E rating EPC, yet only 26 fines got issued in the process. And out of the 23 councils, 17 of them never actually issued a fine at all. So there's only actually 6 of the 23 councils which were issuing fines. And one of the issues with this is it's become very heavy, or what has become apparent is that there's a heavy reliance on people reporting breaches or non-compliance rather than actually checking. And that is a reliance on tenants or agents or whoever it may be to actually report that they don't believe the EPC is compliant or accurate, rather than there actually being spot checks, so to speak, or checking on a system or database that actually tells you what the EPC is. So it relies too heavily on, let's say, any of us who are here tonight in this meeting renting a property, and the responsibility then almost in a way or in a sense being placed on us to say the EPC is not right, or well, actually, this is not a E-rating EPC, or I don't actually have an EPC. So they're relying almost on the occupant to report this rather than doing the due diligence themselves. And again, goes back to this quote here, that the significant challenges with enforcement. And really what this comes to is, well, what are the solutions? You know, do local authorities need to have MEES compliance coordinators? Now, these positions have in some respect been created. So there are people whose not sole jobs, they have other responsibilities, of course, but within local authorities should be checking these things. And should every rented property now, there's been talks around property passports and property databases, which will have essentially a record of all rented properties. And it's something which has been discussed before. This is nothing new. It's been on the table for years and years and years now. And there's been a lot of talk and conversation around, well, should every single property that's rented essentially be registered? So that landlord, as their portfolio, almost acts like a passport, or that property is a passport, which essentially has all the data that is needed on that. So, of course, yes, there's EPCs, but we're talking here about gas safety certificate, PAT testing where appropriate, and then, of course, EICRs. So, a multifaceted, so to speak, of multiple different compliance, health and safety regulator, whatever it may be, tied to that property, so that it's readily available and can be checked and flagged where things aren't as they should be. Is there a gas safety certificate? Yes, no. Simple box ticking. Is there an EPC for this property? Yes. Okay. What's the rating? Is it below an E, or by the time it gets to 2027, is it a C? Whatever that may look like, essentially a database which exists to be able to make it more easily available for anyone. And there's been talks again, whether this will be private or publicly available. You know, it's not for me here tonight to say what the right or wrong answer to that is. It should be. You may well have your own opinions of it as well. But these are to kind of really start to bring in these type of questions that we do need to be asking and finding out. But the reliability of EPCs is perhaps leading on now to what kind of the next half of this session is. And it has been brought into question a lot over the years. And this is before the minimum energy efficiency standards came in. But perhaps more recently, since the MEES regulations have come into effect. But these questions have been asked for a long time now, and the reliability has come into question several times. Now, disclaimer here, this is not for me to, there may very well be EPC assessors in the room tonight, and this is by no means at all a bash whatsoever on EPC assessors, to put it bluntly. These, you know, there's some fantastic assessors out there, they do great jobs, and I think this is to kind of really paint the picture, however, of some statistics which is happening around the country that is starting to cause issues and then potentially leading to this reform, which I'm going to get onto. Now, studying the social housing sector in 2023 actually found out that there was unreliable data with regards to heat retention. And what was actually discovered across the 10,000 homes, which was carried out by Switchy, that heat loss was actually less in those homes which were rated F and G than what those rated at C and D was. Now, logically, that really should be the other way around. Okay, yes, there's going to, of course, be some anomalies there, which you will find and probably expect. But realistically, what we would expect to find normally is the higher rating EPC, you would expect heat retention, energy efficiency to be better. But what they concluded was that actually homes with far less, or should I say far lower EPC ratings, were actually performing better and losing less heat than those which were rated higher. More alarmingly then, another study where 162 EPC assessors were sent to the exact same building. So this wasn't a case of, right, we're going to send a few to one building and a few to another. 162 EPC assessors sent to the exact same commercial building. And what they actually found in their study was up to a 30-point difference was the maximum found between the assessors. Now, to put into context for anyone not really familiar with any EPCs, that could be the difference between an E-rated EPC and a B, or even as much as going down to F or G and achieving a potential C or D rating. So you can see here the error, and with the base then error or deviation being up to an average of 11-point difference between the assessors. So it was quite significant. And what's often found is human error and assumptions, and I've put in sort of here brackets that are wrong and they're just simply not accurate. And sometimes this is through no fault of the assessors, but what is found is that a lot of the time with EPC, particular EPC certificates, is that we find a lot of assumptions or things that are not necessarily true. And to put into context here, which I don't mind sharing this, it's been recorded. I have no issue here. Permission to share. This was my own EPC certificate from a couple of years ago when me and my wife bought our property. And there's a couple of things here I've highlighted. So, the wall built insulated, it's bracket there assumed. 250 millimeter loft insulation. It was a lot thicker than that. You can't get around for this stuff. It's that thick. So it brings into question, did they actually go into the loft and check? It's accessible. There's a ladder there. There's some boarding up there. It is accessible. You can get in there. Another roof, flat insulated. So this referred to the conservatory, which was a flat roof insulated, again, assumed. Well, there wasn't. There simply wasn't any insulation in there. So again, it's been assumed that there is, but in actual fact, there wasn't. But then equally, there could be. That is kind of then sometimes this 50-50 assumption. Well, there is insulation, there isn't insulation. 50% of fixed outlets, lighting. Again, not the case, because 100% of the lighting was low energy efficient lighting. So again, some kind of statistics and things which were put in, and these do impact the score. Ultimately, and again, sort of saying what I said at the start is not for me here to be critical of any particular assessors, but these are things which is factual that these do impact score. It may be 1 point, it may be 2 point. Add these up over a couple of things where they might be 4 or 5 points. If the loft is not accessible, for example, and you say, well, you make the assumption, well, there either isn't or there is. And that 50-50 call, again, it may only be a couple of points, but that couple of points, if on the upper or lower range of a particular banding of the EPC, can be the difference between taking it from one band to another band. And these small points, which add up over time, do make a difference. But as mentioned, this change has come in the way that EPCs are carried out. So whether or not this is a result of the upcoming changes to MEES, or whether it is because of this unreliability or errors or inconsistencies which have been displayed. But the consultation, which was launched in December of last year, of the year just gone, lasted for 12 weeks, actually only closed at the end of February. So at the time of this recording, a couple of weeks ago, it was closed. Essentially a 12-week consultation period, where then it was the hope or intention is to completely reform the way that EPCs are carried out, with an estimated implementation of next year. So the aim, if all goes to plan. Now, this is not going to be the end of it. Of course, public consultation is now finished, but this will, as it always does now, go to government. They will have their further discussions, I'm sure, about this, and bring together all of the concerns and equally, support which there may be as well for these EPC reforms coming up. But the hope is that these will then come into effect from April of 2026. And the kind of key things to touch on here, so the metrics, so looking at now more into material performance, how the building material, building fabrics in that particular building actually perform, heating systems, and then actual energy costs, which has always been a difficult thing. Now, I'm not going to keep talking about difficulties and how those things are measured, but these are going to be things which are going to be implemented in. What I mentioned about the exemptions, so typically our heritage buildings were excluded from these or exempt, and now actually going to be included. Now, although I've just mentioned it a moment ago, I'm not going to really try to talk about the problems that we're finding with this, but it can be sort of very difficult not to, is there's been talks here, well, they're going to build a system that will take into account, well, it's older, there may be certain characteristics of that building that can't be changed, and therefore it can only meet a certain standard or a certain EPC rating. But how that's going to actually look in practice, we don't know yet. It's all very much theory and talking about what's going to, or what may happen, rather than what's actually going to happen. So we're not really much the wiser as to how that's going to look in practice. I think theory is perhaps there, but what has been said is that heritage buildings are also going to be included rather than being excluded from EPC ratings. The validity period, so typically 10 years. So every 10 years now, EPCs are required. There's talks that that may well be decreasing to as much as either 2 or 3 years. There's been talks of 5, 7, and even leaving it as it is at 10. So again, something which is rarely unknown. There's a lot of opinions around that, I'm sure, about validity of that, how long it should last for. Should it be every time a new tenant goes into the house? Again, yeah, it's not for us to say, but if short-term leases, which maybe 6 months, 1 year, question, would it be reasonable to ask for that? As that much going to have changed within that period? But equally, is 10 years too long? Again, these are we will all have our own opinions on this matter, of course, but that is something as sort of to consider as well. And then the measurements as well as the metrics, you then look at the actual thermal performance, smart meters, and then actual temperatures. So again, how this is going to be done is something else. We're going to be equipping assessors with thermal imaging, for example, thermal imaging cameras. We don't know. This is all things which perhaps need to be discussed. But this, of course, does lead on to, well, how is it going to be done? Now, training and schemes are going to be updated. More advanced training given to assessors. So this will be both new assessors and the existing ones. Now, an interesting point. Now, someone did actually ask me. I don't want to get too much onto Q&A now, in case anyone is thinking this. But one person did actually mention this to me at the Future Build Expo, which was last week. As I did a similar presentation talking around EPCs, a little bit different to the topic tonight. But what they did mention is, well, what about if I'm thinking of becoming an EPC assessor now? What's that going to look like then under the EPC reforms? And well, it's a good question, and one I don't really have the answer to. Is essentially, if you are thinking of becoming an EPC assessor now, are you going to have to train, become an assessor, and then essentially in 12 months' time be forced to retrain or redo your course or do a CPD or some element of retraining, so to speak, to then meet what the reforms are going to be? Do you just wait? Do you simply just wait until the reform has happened and new training courses are accredited, schemes available, and they then become available? It's difficult to say. We don't really have the answer to those at the moment. There may be some here tonight who may be able to give their wisdom on that, but I think at the moment there's no real right or wrong answer to if you should become an EPC assessor today. What I can say in a couple of years' time is you're going to be very, very busy, but whether you should do your course now or wait until the reform has happened, so to speak, or should I say comes into effect, then that is another question. More quality checks. Welcomed, but difficult in practice is what I've put. How do you do quality checks? Are we going to have someone who's within a local authority or works for the government as a whole, or are these employed by multiple local authorities, or is it their job across the board? Are they going to start coming in and checking EPC assessors, for example? We don't know. These are things. How do you carry out quality checks? So whilst it's been mentioned within the reform about checking quality, again, putting that into practice may be difficult. But the same issues still present. And this comes down to, well, assessor honesty. Now, again, and this is to really pick my words here, but be fair, is there's been stories, and there's certainly, it's out there. I'm not saying anything which can't be publicly found. There's stories where there has been things which have happened. Friends of landlords, friends of owners of properties, and to get their EPC score up, they've said, look, come on, see if you can get it up a few points. whatever whatever that may be. I'm not saying that has happened to anyone who's across the EI or anyone who we may know, but these do happen. There's stories of this, and it's difficult to prove or disprove. We are not going to sit here and accuse anybody of doing this, but assessor honesty does come into it. If they are very close friends, then, does it, again, a question, and no right or wrong to this, something to think about. Does that bring into question if you was with the RICS, for example, or you're with an organisation where declaring conflict of interest is required as part of the job? If there's potential conflict of interest there, should they be carrying that? Should they be carrying out that assessment? Should they be doing that certificate for their friend, unless they're going to be 100% factually accurate and report that certificate as they would any other property? It's difficult. More stories around, EPC assessors turning up to properties and being in and out in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Have they fully carried out a thorough check and a thorough EPC certificate, or carried out a full EPC of that property in that time? Again, another question to be asked. The training provider. So there's many training providers out there, but there's slight differences between the way that the training is carried out. So what's provided, all of us here could go and get our accreditation as an EPC assessor from different providers, whilst ultimately, yes, we'd be doing the same job, and you would like to think the training that would be provided would be for the most part the same, or elements of it, or the key elements of it would certainly be the same. There may well be some parts of that which are not. And therefore, is it time to bring in a universal system where it's all the same training? Again, another question. The policing and monitoring, which we've already spoke about, how do we police it? How is it monitored? And then what is it actually telling us? Now, for the purpose of tonight, I'm sure a few of you are more than welcome to question me on this, and we can have a discussion for many hours as part of what I teach on a weekly basis, but my PhD topic as well is, energy efficiency and sustainability debate is often brought into question. And I can tell you for a fact is that energy efficiency and sustainability are not the same thing. You can have an A-rated EPC property, does not mean it is sustainable. But that's another conversation. Feel free to quiz me about that at the end, or I'll talk to you about that on another night, I'm sure. But the question more from that is, what is an energy efficiency performer or EPC actually telling us? And the solutions, as mentioned, should assessors then be reviewed? Should there be penalties for assessors? We talk about having fines and penalties in place for non-compliance of meeting MEES. So, you're a landlord, you're renting out your property, you don't meet an E rating, or indeed come the reforms and come the new changes to MEES, you don't meet the C rating. Well, do assessors need to carry the same penalties? And again, this is not me saying that this should happen, but I have my opinions on this. But these are just questions which are getting thrown around. Should there be penalties for assessors, for example? Should there be one universal training provision? So essentially one course, and no matter the provider, whether that be Elmhurst, whether it be Energy Saving, whoever it may be, there's many, of course. I'm not promoting or singling out any EPC assessor accredited courses, but should they all essentially adopt one universal system where no matter which provider you go to, the course is exactly the same? As mentioned earlier, does a database need to be set up that's then monitored? Again, how is that policed? How is that monitored? Whose job is that? But essentially, that is something which has been spoken about many times, not just me tonight, but it's been spoken about a lot on whether there should be property databases for the rented sector, both in the commercial and residential sector. And then education. Education, there's still a lot of knowledge gaps out there at the moment where indeed landlords, tenants and homeowners don't necessarily really know what EPCs are. And whilst it's become a much bigger topic, and certainly since the introduction of MEES in 2018, there's a greater awareness of it now, but there's still a lot of people who don't really know what it is or what it means. And again, going back to the earlier statement of what it's actually telling us. So again, that education piece really does need to come in. But thank you. With that, I will sort of end there, and I'll head over now to Adetunji, who will sort of lead any Q&As. Please feel free to put them in the chat, or if you're comfortable, just do bear in mind it is still being recorded if you have any questions. But otherwise, yeah, either for Adam's brilliant presentation earlier, or if there's anything you want to ask me. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jordan. Really excellent view on MEES and EPCs. So I don't see we've got any questions, but if anyone's got, hold on, I think there might be one in the chat. Okay, so Tom Crook has got 2 questions for Adam. Tom, I'm just checking if I can actually see your question. Okay, I think we've got more questions coming in. Really good. So Tom, do you want to just unmute yourself and speak and ask a question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
I just I had 2 small questions about what you were doing. So I hear AI and machine learning, and I was a bit confused by your presentation and what you were describing. You were describing that there's energy savings through all sorts of options, and you listed things like HVAC and circuit control and lighting and smart sockets, and then you were talking about plugs. So I was curious in my 2 questions. The first one was, where does the machine learning come into this? Because it seems like the plug monitors and might tell the client if a socket is consuming energy, say after 5 p.m. when there's not supposed to be people using the building, and then you can say this is standby mode. So you could save X amount of energy by turning off 10 computers from standby mode per year or such. And I suppose the second one after that is if you do other things after plug loads.
Yeah, sure. So so the purpose of it was kind of to sort of, I suppose, highlight the fact that the baselining, regardless of what technology we use, has a lot of these flaws in it. Yeah. And the where I kind of focused in on the AI and the ML was with what we're doing in plug sockets. So that's what we do right now. But the concepts that we're using, there's there's possible you could use similar concepts within other pieces of technology. It's not exclusive to that. So hence why that's why the kind of the focus was on sort of the ML plug load prediction and the projecting the energy use out there, and that's how it kind of started on a wider range of sort of solutions that you can have there, because they all use baselining to justify their savings. And then in terms of expanding, yeah, so it's part of our roadmap. We've started on plug sockets, small power, plug load. There's not, there's we saw it as a gap where there's not a lot of, there's smart sockets, but they're smart in the fact that you can just remotely turn them on and off. But there's not a huge amount of automation there, and we saw a gap where we could really come in and learn those patterns with some ML and then automate it. But yeah, our long-term roadmap is to be able to do this in BMSs, on HVAC, on other pieces of technology. Become more of a brain that can run other bits of hardware.
Maybe I didn't catch it. Where does the energy saving particularly come from? Is it the remote controlling? Is that sort of what your company's providing?
Yeah, so essentially what we do is we go into commercial buildings and automate behind the scenes the turning off of all of the appliances that are consuming energy when people aren't in the building. And that can be, this is plug sockets, fuse spurs. So, think electric heaters, electric boilers, hot water taps, TVs, printers, kitchen equipment, just anything that can potentially be left on, wasting energy when no one's there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There's another question in chat as well.
Okay, thanks. Did you have another question? Because I think Adam has actually done a good job on the earlier question. I think Adam know your technology a little bit, but I think it was perhaps useful to talk a little bit more about the fuse POR option. So it doesn't appear it's only 3-pin plugged solutions, because with the fuse POR plug approach, there's so many more things that could be controlled. But Tom, did you have another question, Tom?
My two questions were sort of answered out. My first one was about what. So I suppose the part that I didn't ask was about where are the savings coming from, and that's from the remote control of the plugs. And the second part was about where is machine learning coming in, and I'm assuming it's some sort of time series prediction related to the baselining. And then the third part was about if you're expanding to other areas. So you said something about expanding this mine to include others. I think.
Yeah, sure. The machine learning bit. So our machine learning is essentially we have created a model that has thousands of different appliances that are in it, and then we're able to use that model to identify what appliance has been plugged in. So looking at power signatures, 12 different parameters of power coming from like a TV or a hot water tap or a monitor or a laptop. We can then use that machine learning model to identify what appliance that is there. And then what we're using is a sort of some AI to then learn or kind of predict what energy will be used when it's turned off based on the state that that appliance is in. So is it in standby? Is it in active use? Has it been turned off? What level of standby is it in? And then the historic pattern that appliance has done. So for example, we know that many printers have multiple standby modes. So they'll turn into one standby mode and then after a few hours go down into a lower power consumption. And learning that within the AI and the ML then allows us to accurately project what we'll save and not over project, because we're saying that that we're projecting all the savings off active energy use.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Adam. I think there was one more question for you, Adam. This before we go to Jordan. There was a question in the Q&A asking, can your solution be scaled to industrial and healthcare settings?
Yeah. So essentially in any building that has got plug sockets, fuse spurs, and has got appliances that are likely to get left on, we have them installed in manufacturing facilities and some industrial facilities. We have some healthcare settings that we've got these are used in the NHS. Now they're not used on critical clinical appliances like heart monitors or anything that's life-giving, but they're used in non-critical scenarios, and down the line we'll be able to take in more data from things like more industrial machinery and stuff like that. That's part of our roadmap.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries.
Really good, Adam. Thanks very much. And I think just to stretch a little bit about what your technology does, that aspect of being able to recognize when the grid is struggling with renewables and the signal it gives. So a little bit more maybe, but I'm not sure we've got enough time.
No, I think
So,
Adi, I think that could be a whole other presentation, to be honest.
another one altogether. Yes. Well, thank you very much. So, Jordan, we've got a question we've got a question for you. I think it was from Carlos. Carlos, did you want to unmute and ask your question directly? Or if you're happy for me to read it, I can do that.
I can do so. Well, thank you so much for both presentations. Really, really interesting. I think what I was looking at is that participating in some of the feedback for collecting for the new EPCs is looking into, I very much agree with what Jordan was actually saying, all these assumptions and, many times the human errors that we are getting there. But it's looking into if, for example, a kind of data monitoring approach, when nowadays we get used to get temperature sensors, air quality, if that can be as well implemented into EPCs. If we are looking into getting better EPCs, if that's something that he will consider, that could have an effect.
Yeah, no, thank you. And yeah, well, just quickly before I answer that, I was just going to say, no, Adam, we will happily have you back. If you want to go do another presentation, I'll happily have you back to deliver on that. So no, not a problem at all. You're very welcome to come back and talk about that. I'd certainly be interested. But no, Carlos, thank you. And yeah, this is it's part of the problem that at the minute, and it's probably going to feel like I'm not really answering the question fully, is that it is difficult because at the minute, of course, all of this is theory. We're not seeing it in practice. And my not really wanting to give too much of a personal view, but my view on this at the moment is that when it does convert into a practical sense, are we still going to have the same problems as we've got now? You can create these reforms. Yes, the training, the measures, the things which are put into place are going to change, or, what's expected is going to be changed. But ultimately, we're still going to have partly the same problems, is that, those assumptions are still going to be there. There's still going to be certain measures. Now, do we need to get to a point where we're saying, right, well, like a home buyers report, for example, by the RICS, you've got to start including photos or video evidence or, photo evidence, say, right, well, look, this is a photo of the loft. You can clearly see, we're not going to hold them to holding a ruler to measure how thick the insulation is, but something, that can kind of indicate, well, yes, been in the loft, you see clearly there's a lot of insulation there, as an example. With the other measures, again, the heat retention or thermal imaging cameras or whatever that may be, again, all these things sound good, but where's the money coming from to pay for them? Are these assessors going to be provided with them? Are they not? And kind of comes down a little bit to what I mentioned or touched on sort of in the session, is that, well, does essentially a passport need to be created, or some data which is tied to that property so that you can see exactly, what that EPC certificate was, everything in the past, everything that's been done, who the assessor was. That assessor can then be tracked. There's then the opportunity to see that assessor's work. I'm not saying, they need to be criticised, right? But everything's there. Essentially, everything is in a database. You can see what property has been assessed, what its previous assessments were, what its score, how did it earn that score, who's the assessor, what's all these things. What seems simple, what's their average score, what is that EPC assessor's average score? Are they tied to one area? Is it specific properties that they're going and assessing? Is it a 3-bedroom semi? Do they only do all hypothetical situations, but things which I think, if closely monitored, what we spoke about is the enforcement sort of side of it, is that it relies so heavily on me and you, or anyone for that matter, to be reporting rather than it already being there. It's like, this is probably a really bad comparison, but it's like seeing a crime or a crime happening. And I'm not at all saying it's a crime. Please don't. I don't want to be misquoted here, but you've got to report the crime. Well, it shouldn't be the case for crimes happening in this scenario. As I said, maybe a bad example, but if there's something there that's happening, why should we be the ones who have to report it for it then to be monitored? But then more importantly, when it is then being reported, as you saw in the case that I gave earlier on, nothing's actually been done about it anyway. So it then kind of really says that there's not that much pressure or penalty or anything really being placed on it, regardless of what seems to happen. So I think more than anything, there's a big need to sort of focus on how does this come into practice, rather than dreaming hypothetically what can happen or what these reforms are going to do. It still, to me, won't solve a lot of the issues in a kind of practical sense, or a lot of the issues that we've got now are still going to exist when this reform comes in. So again, I'm sorry, I know I've probably gone on a little bit there. I'm trying to be detailed with what kind of, be a bit more practical with it. I don't think in the short term, certainly in the next 12 to 18 months, we'll see any improvement in EPC reliability, to be perfectly honest. But again, I don't want to get too political or share too much of my own views. It could be a very, very, very long night.
Thank you, Jordan, for that response. I think it's as somebody who responded on behalf of my organization to the recent consultation, which had circa 49 questions in it. I think there is a lot to be looked into. It took us quite a while to get through it. But I've just got one question of my own, Jordan, for you. When we look at the demolition sector as an example, and we look at some structural engineering disciplines, they use a lot more tools to find the answers when they deal with buildings. So they clearly, before demo, they understand what's in the building, what are the layers. Should we, not as an industry, not be mandating assessors to use more tools to get the job done, rather than 70% of what they're saying being just assumptions? What would be your view on that?
Short answer, yes. I completely agree. I think, again, I'd be absolutely for it, but I think, again, practicality of it is, again, the difficulty of being able to do this. But, we talk a lot about building accreditation certificates for sustainability accreditation. So, we know about BREEAM, Neighbours, LEED, for example. All of these are kind of building rating systems for sustainability. Do we need to be looking perhaps more at those rather than the EPC? I mean, in some respects, and I'm not saying this is, but in some respects, one way of looking at it is, well, if you're going to demolish a building, and I don't know if you're thinking of this line, so forgive me, if you're demolishing the building, what does the EPC matter? It kind of becomes a little bit irrelevant. Yeah, that could have been an A-rated EPC, but if you're going to get rid of everything, then the EPC becomes pointless. So then, you're completely right. It needs to be replaced. Well, what's the Neighbours rating? What's the LEED rating? What's the BREEAM rating? What's actually in that building, so that we can get an understanding? What I feel should happen is they should work or coincide with each other, and I'm not saying every building is going to have this, but ultimately, if the EPC ratings are A, and you have a BREEAM rating or LEED or WELL or Neighbour, whatever it may be, there's lots of different accreditations out there. Look at them side by side, and then you will start to see the picture, or a picture will start to become clearer if they're put side by side with each other. It's certainly something there. I do notice someone had put something in on the Q&A. It's only because I had it open, it popped up on my screen. So forgive me, Adetunji, if you don't mind.
Yeah, if you go ahead. We've got a question from someone anonymous, but if you could answer that'd be helpful.
Absolutely. So I thought just quickly, firstly, on Raj had mentioned about mixed data model. Absolutely, I'm on it. It's very much my research area, and absolutely, give me time. It's coming in the next six months or so. I will be looking at publishing something around this, because absolutely, a mixed model approach, I think, is the best solution. It's perhaps difficult from a residential setting, as a lot of these accreditation systems apply to the commercial sector. But that's not to say that they won't come in. It's not to say that we can't. There may be ways these can be adopted. If we're going for an EPC reform, why can some of these building accreditation network certificates not also apply into residential? Some of them do. I'm not saying they don't. Some of them do, but coinciding with each other, I think is definitely the right approach. And to Mr. Anonymous, I completely agree. Well, thank you. I'm glad you sort of think I'm on the right line, but absolutely, and I agree, it is not fair. Some of these higher costs. Someone mentioned this to me. It was an EPC assessor themselves, and he'll probably not mind me sharing this. Is you look at what some of these EPC assessors are paid, and in the example he gave me, which again he'll not mind me sharing this, he'd been paid £45 to go to a property. It took him nearly an hour and a half to get there. He was at the property. It took him nearly an hour and a half to get back, and all in all, 4.5 hours work for £45. Now, if you want to carry out really, really thorough assessments that are going to be high quality, and carried out to the level that again, in theory, is what this is going to, is what this reform is eventually going to lead to, then, does a standard sort of set fee need to be implied, or, does something need to be brought in where you have to be compliant, and the government, as you mentioned, needs to be involved with setting templates. You do not want people, forgive me, but taking the mickey with it. And equally, you're always going to drive competition. If someone's going to do it cheaper, the same thing, and you'll have heard me mention the RICS a few times here, but, RICS surveyors, it's the highest level you get if you have own buyer's report or report done. You will have to pay for it. And sometimes that may be 200, 300, 400, 500 pounds. Does an EPC assessment need to get to, I'm not saying the same level, but to a point where that, that there is a set fee potentially that they have to pay. So yeah, I would probably agree. I think that is a fair assessment and something that perhaps needs to be done.
Okay. No, really good. Thank you very much. I think that's it by way of questions. And I think there's quite a few connections I think will follow after this event. I think from the questions Adam has responded to and the ones you've responded to, I think we're clearly in a position where there is a strong industry recognition of the issues we have on energy EPCs and minimum energy efficiency standards. So yeah, I think we're part of the discussion. We haven't answered all the questions today, maybe because we don't have all the answers to some of them. We don't run the government, whilst we will tell them what to do, but there are clearly some things. But I think it's looking good. We've had a very good engagement today. I can't see anyone dropping off, so that tells me we've been touching on all the right points in these two sessions. So thank you very much, Adam. Thank you, Jordan. And I'm just going to call back Jordan as the chair of the branch to give some sort of thanks and some info as a closing. Thank you, everyone.
No, thank you very much, Adetunji, very much. And thank you for your time tonight as well. And again, Adam, extend my thanks, I think, on behalf of everyone tonight. Again, thank you very much for your time. And I'll say it again, we'll happily have you back. So please don't run away. Don't go anywhere for this year, because we want you on standby for our future events. Really interesting topic. So yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for all your questions, some good questions and engagement there. And that's what we want. Yeah. By all means, do connect with us on LinkedIn. Be great to have some further discussions with you. It's always appreciated. Whilst I lecture and I'm doing my PhD, I am more than welcome to collaborate with people and air your thoughts and opinions around these matters as well. It's always good to get insight. But no, really, just to sort of say our next event, we'll be looking at provisionally at the moment for Tuesday, the 13th of May. Keep an eye out again on emails and indeed our sort of East Midlands branch page. The easiest way, a few people have been in touch about this. If you just type in Energy Institute East Midlands branch, the first page which will come up there, and you just click on that and it will take you to our actual East Midlands page where we've got our events coming up there. What I'll kind of finish with is this, really. It may seem a bit jokey, but we need you. What I mean by this is, please do get in touch. One of the things we mentioned in our meetings at the beginning of the year, and indeed something we want to do as a branch is really reach out to the members, which is, ultimately you, and across the region, is to get in touch with us. Is there something, even if it's tonight, is something you particularly enjoyed, want to discuss with us more, or if there's a particular topic or something that you want to see or hear more about, and that can be more generally. If you want to connect with us and talk to us about it, we can either help ourselves, or we can point you, in direction of someone sort of more national level within the Energy Institute who can assist and can help with what your query may be. But equally, if you want to get involved yourself, do you want to speak about a particular area? Is this something that's a bit of a hot topic at the moment that you've got a lot of knowledge in, or you're certainly interested or passionate about, and you'd like to talk to us about it? We'd absolutely welcome you. So, do reach out to us. We do meet and talk regularly as a committee, and we're always keen to hear from our members. And essentially, is what we want to do is bring this back to you. What do you want from us? What is it that you want us to to sort of bring either to the table or something we can assist you with as getting the most ultimately out of your membership. But sort of more probably key so is that as a member of our sort of East Midlands branch, or indeed across the West Midlands as well, if you're anywhere essentially in the Midlands region, that you would like to reach out. So, you know, connect with us on LinkedIn or do email us. So it's eastmidlands@energyinst.org, and I've kind of put it on there. And these sort of slides should be available. The recording should be available shortly after. We'll sort of get it saved. It'll sort of save onto the relevant cloud as it is, and then we'll get it uploaded onto the website once that gets over to headquarters. So yeah, unless there's anything else, anyone, I will sort of really wrap it up there and stop the recording unless anyone else has got any further questions or comments from anyone before we wrap up.
No, thanks, Jordan, and everyone. I think that's it. It's been a good night of robust technical discussions, and yeah, we're touching on policy as well. So really good, I think.
No,
thank you.
Perfect. No, great. Well, with that, everyone, I'll stop the recording there, and once again, just thank everybody for joining this evening. Thank you very much.